Well, then in the next year, would have been in the fall of 76. Joe called up from Brussels at the time and said, we're going to start a new project in Ejede in Nigeria. And I want you to come over and be the co-directors with Richard Kitney and his wife. And so they said, but you need to leave Mama and the baby. By that time, Taryn had been born. He'd been born in September. Rhonda was flying all over the world when she was 8 months pregnant. We didn't know that. We thought she was 7 months pregnant, and they had the timing all wrong. She was flying in all these little planes out to Kansas to see my folks, and I'm surprised she didn't deliver in an airplane. But he was born in September. Well, and right before Thanksgiving, Joe called and said, I want you to go to Nigeria, and you need to leave Mom and the baby at home. He says, this is a different situation than what Kenya is. And you come by yourself. And that was the understatement of the year. I got on we had no credit cards in those days. I mean, I didn't have a credit card. And we'd sent a telex to Richard Kitney in Nigeria, but there was no response, and it was 2 weeks ahead of time. But that was pretty typical for trying to communicate, especially in the developing world at that time. And so we'd gotten the tickets and sent the telex that I'm going to arrive, and I had $35 and got on a plane in Nairobi and flew to Kinshasa and then to Lagos and got there at 11 o'clock at night. And come to find out that in the airport, there were no phones because they were building a new freeway, and they'd cut all the old British phone lines to that north part of Lagos. This is a town of 6-7 million people, and nobody had the blueprints from the old British system of where the phone lines were. And so they just said, well, I guess, too bad. There's no phones for a third of the city, including the airport. And the only way that the offices of the airlines communicated with their downtown office was just shortwave radio. They had their own shortwave radio. And so I didn't know, it was 11 o'clock at night, I didn't know, I couldn't get in touch with the Kitneys. And I had to get someplace for a phone, and I had all these 3 bags with me. And so I used 15 of my $35 to take a bus down to one of the 3 hotels that the guys at Pan Am office said would you could stay in. And so I went down and got off the bus at this hotel, and it was certainly not what I expected. I mean, it was in the middle. Lagos was basically one big slum. And went into the lobby, and that's where I first confronted Nigerian culture, which was everything. Everything has to have a bribe to it. You can't get anything done without paying somebody off. And they had no rooms. Oh, well, for how much would it take to find a room? And well, yeah, we got a room, but since you have no reservations, you have no reservation. Well, how much would it take to get a reservation? Well, you pay that, and then yeah, you have a reservation. There's no rooms available. Well, how much is it going to take to get that? Ultimately, I realized I was getting nowhere with that, so I just decided to spend the night in the lobby at this hotel. It was an international quote hotel, and being told by the front desk clerk the whole time, no sleeping in the lobby. And so I would be waking up trying to make sure that nobody ripped off my bags that were sitting around me in the hotel, and sleeping as well, and thinking, well, what am I going to do when it gets to be light? And I figured, well, I'm going to do a development call on the manager of the hotel and see if I can't in-kind a place to eat and sleep, at least until I get and find this Richard Kitney that I'm supposed to be finding and hooking up with. So this guy was a Greek. He was a Greek, and he was a manager of the hotel. And I went in, and as soon as he watched him come in, and he went in the door and it said manager, I thought, well, this must be the guy. And went in and talked with him, and very nice guy, and was, you did a story of why you were there, and you were doing human development projects, and you were self-funded, and there wasn't anybody else back in the United States going to give you any money. And so he said, well, come back in the afternoon and we'll see what we can do. And so I felt pretty good. And in the midst of that, tried to call Richard Kitney, or I called the bishop, the Catholic bishop, who was my other contact phone number. Did get a hold of the Catholic bishop's office or the house, and turns out the Catholic bishop was on safari. And the guy who answered the phone didn't know where he was, and obviously wasn't going to tell me anyhow if he did. And I asked about Richard Kitney. He says, well, Richard Kitney's on safari too. And I said, well, how long is he going to be gone? He says, well, probably 2 weeks. And I'm sitting here thinking, man, I'm really going to have to do a story on this Greek guy in order to stay in this hotel and have food for 2 weeks. So, and there was no way to do phone calls, because the phone in Nigeria, they had only, the government only purchased so much, in effect, what was bandwidth with the satellite. There was very few communication satellites, and so you make an international phone call. They would only have it available certain times a day, and even then, the only way you could do it, I found out later, was you picked up the phone, and in an office, there would be somebody hired just to pick up the phone and listen to it. That's all they'd do, until there was a dial tone. And then once the dial tone came on, then you would place the call and hope that there was somebody who answered. Because if you got a busy signal, click, and now you were back to holding your phone. So I was disconcerted at that point. Well, by the time noon came, I thought, well, I'm going to call the office for it was CHAN, the Christian Health Association of Nigeria. That's where Richard Kitney worked. And miracle of miracles, I actually got somebody on the phone there, an African that had worked with him, and he said, or that was his assistant, he says, oh yeah, Richard actually will be coming in today. And he said, let me call back in an hour. And so I did, and lo and behold, I talked to Richard Kitney. Richard had never gotten the telex, had no clue that I was arriving, but he did tell me how to direct a cab to get over to where his office was. And they had a house in the, quote, suburbs, in a little area called Surulere, where all the houses had walls around them. So I finally ended up, by the end of that day, 24 hours later after leaving Nairobi, actually walking into a house, and there was no furniture in it. I mean, it was just a house.